Hi everybody, welcome into Out of the Gate, Daily Racing Forum's weekend handicapping preview program. My name is Matt Bernier, and here's what's on deck in this week's edition of Out of the Gate. In our opening segment, Mike Beer and I will give you a couple of horses that you can throw in your DRF horse watch to keep an eye on going forward. We'll also go over 3 graded stakes races from all across the country, the Indiana Derby, the Delaware Handicap, as well as the Los Alamitos Derby. Peter Thomas for Natal Tournament Talk this week. He's over in the UK, and he takes a listener's question regarding last week's Belmont Oaks winner, Athena. We'll dive into a couple other things as well. Jonathan Kinchen with JK's Play of the Day. He takes a look at a pick 3 at Indiana Grand on Saturday. A nighttime form U.S. Spotlight. We get David Aragona. He's taking a look at a fantastic race out at Belmont this weekend, the main event. That is the Forbidden Apple. And we'll wrap things up with Beer and I giving you a couple of best bets. Hopefully we can smoke out some winners. Without further ado, let's get things going. Here is this week's Horse Watch. We begin Out of the Gate with our Horse Watch segment. Mike Beer, you've got a nice little horse that you found at Belmont recently.
Yeah, last Friday on the Twilight card at Belmont Park in race number 7. This is a maiden special weight sprint. The horse we're going to look at here is Payne. This horse made 2 starts as a 2-year-old last year for Brad Cox in Kentucky. Didn't win those races, but ran well both times. This is his first start as a 3-year-old, first start for Chad Brown. The interesting thing about this race is early on, he got into some kickback. It looked like he didn't like it, and he dropped way back out of contention. And once he got into the clear, this horse made a big run on the turn to catch up to the leaders, and he just powered right by them to the lead. You can see here, went clear in the stretch. This was a really nice performance, a huge step forward in his 3-year-old debut. Very interested to see where he goes next.
Yeah, definitely an impressive performance. I also thought there was a pretty impressive performance. This one happened to be out on the West Coast, though. This is a horse called Instagram. We're going to take a look at his career debut. This is a horse trained by Jerry Hollendorfer. Now, Hollendorfer has made mention that this horse, they could have waited until Del Mar, but this one was ready to roll. He doesn't have a ton of pedigree. He's by Into Mischief out of Valois Ron Mare. They paid $1.2 million for this horse, and based on the way he debuts, I would understand why. He earned an 88 Beyer speed figure in his career debut, going 5/8 of a mile at Los Al. Now, Los Al has made good horses look bad and bad horses look good a number of times in the past. But I have to be honest with you, I kind of get the feeling that this one could be a little bit of a runner. Wouldn't be surprised at all if you saw him in a race like the Best Pal and eventually targeting races out in Southern California like the Del Mar Futurity. But looks like Instagram could be a little bit of a runner for Jerry Hollendorfer and company. We're going to dive into our first graded stakes race here this week on Out of the Gate. Let's go out for the DRF Bets race of the day, Indiana Grand. It's the Indiana Derby. First graded stakes race that we'll take a look at on this week's edition of Out of the Gate is the Indiana Derby. It also happens to be the DRF Bets race of the day for Saturday. You can head over to the Race of the Day page on DRF.com, download free Formulator past performances, and dive into this entire field. You can also head over to video.drf.com for expanded stakes analysis. Mike and I go through every horse in post-position order. Mike, this race really boils down to, what do you think of King Zachary? Because at 6-5 on the morning line, he doesn't really offer a lot as far as value is concerned. And really, if you like him, you're banking on just that 198 Beyer that he earned. Yeah,
I guess that's the real problem with him. I mean, I'm not way against him in this race. I do feel like if he shows up and runs Saturday the way that he ran when we last saw him in the Matt Win, that he's just going to be really, really hard to beat. But he's also a very short price on the morning line with only one real race to point to. That made me shop around a little bit in this race.
You're interested in a horse that Steve Asmussen has always talked highly of, especially early on in the Oaklawn Park meeting. There was a thought for a minute that this horse could be on the Kentucky Derby trail. You're going to go with Title Ready.
Yeah, it turned out that he wasn't quite Derby material for Asmussen, but he did, sort of take small steps forward throughout the spring. He wasn't ready for the Derby. They didn't go for that race. And then they showed up in the Ohio Derby last time. This is a 1 1/8, the grade 3. We're going to take a look at that right now. There's 2 horses exiting the Ohio Derby coming back in the Indiana Derby. That's Trigger Warning, who's in this race. He's 86-1, but we're going to focus on Title Ready, who's right behind him. He's sort of in between horses. He doesn't have huge trouble in this race, Matt, but I just felt like he was in a bit of a tight spot there. You saw him lose some position in the stretch, and then he's racing on again at the end of this race. He's not going to be able to get up for third, but he's gaining at the end. I feel like maybe this race is a step in the right direction for him. I'll be honest, Matt, I don't love him in this race, but I do feel like if I'm going to take a shot against King Zachary, they got him 12-1 on the morning line. I think that's a great price on this horse. If he's close to that, I'm going to take a small shot here and hope he can take one more step forward.
Yeah, no disrespect to Trigger Warning, but I feel like of the 2 horses coming out of that race, I'm much more interested in Title Ready than I am in Trigger Warning. I hate to do this. I hate to chalk out, but I'm going to King Zachary. This is a horse that has always it's always felt like there was some ability there, and perhaps the Matt win was finally him putting it all together when he earned that blowout score. But I was most intrigued with him initially back when he broke his maiden at Gulfstream Park. That's the race we're going to take a look at right now. Now, you can understand beating up on maidens. That doesn't mean all of a sudden you're going to be a superstar, but at least visually, it looked like he could turn into a serious racehorse. I gave him a chance in the Wood Memorial, and maybe it was too much too soon, but he's come back and he's looked pretty solid in each of his past 2 starts. One of them was over a sloppy sealed surface at Churchill Downs. He came from slightly off the pace, and then most recently in that Matt win where he put the boots to the field. Now, you got to look at that Matt win and say, 98 buyer, kind of out of left field. He hasn't done anything close to that in the past, and doesn't hurt when Axeman, the 1-2 favorite, completely falls on his face and doesn't really do any running. Nonetheless, King Zachary, I'm going to go with him in this spot, hoping that he can replicate that Matt win, because then at that point, if he comes close to it, you might be looking at a pretty solid 3-year-old going through the summer. Perhaps we see him at some point up at Saratoga. Peter Thomas Fornatale, tournament talk this week. It's not really tournament talk because he's over in the UK. He's all over the place, but he is going to take a listener's question during last week's Belmont Oaks winner, Athena.
Peter Thomas Fornatale back with you at Newmarket. This is the July course, one of the 2 race courses here at Newmarket, along with the Roley Mile, the seat of racing in the UK. Having a very pleasant day out here. Had a great morning on the gallops. Want to put out a little thank you to my friend John Berry, the master of Beverly House. He has a stable star named Roy Rocket, who I got to pat this morning at the yard. That was a great treat. That horse has won 8 races at Brighton Racecourse, a real horse for course there. Real pleasure getting to meet him and talk training with John Berry this morning. We had a listener question that I was going to do this week, and it concerned the horse Athena, who did so well in winning the Belmont Oaks for Aidan O'Brien last week. And the question was from a bettor who couldn't find the horse and was concerned about why she didn't look so good, having all 3 races basically in 3 weeks' time, or 3.5 weeks' time. That was too much for this listener to bear, and ended up overlooking Athena, a horse that I had spoken positively about on the DRF Players podcast. And the question was, what did this person miss, especially regarding those races in such a short period of time? And I actually spoke to John Berry about it this morning while we were out there at the yard, and he made the point that when you're evaluating European runners, especially those shipping to the United States, you have to consider Lasix and the fact that it's easier for horses to come back with more races in a shorter amount of time when they're not running on Lasix. So the fact that Athena had those 2 compressed races and was coming back in a week at Belmont, maybe not that big a deal, because Lasix, obviously a diuretic, it dehydrates the horses. Races really tend to flatten horses more when they run on Lasix. They need more time between. Not so of a European runner like Athena. So I thought I'd offer that note on this Out of the Gate segment. Also just want to let folks know to check out DRF tournaments, opportunities to win into Keeneland this weekend, as well as the World Championship of Handicapping. Check it out. I'm going to give you a little panorama here as I leave you today, just showing a little bit more of this amazing July course at Newmarket. Great place. Any racing fan should make it a point to get here at some point. Definitely a bucket list item and one of the great racetracks in the world. And that's all I have for this segment on Out of the Gate. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. Stay tuned for more right after this.
Are you a horse player looking to raise your game? For over 120 years, expert handicappers have relied on Daily Racing Form as their must-have source for news and data, featuring exclusive buyer speed figures, Timeform US pace figures, and integrated replays. DRF Formulator is the most powerful handicapping tool on the market today. Use what the pros use. Go to drf.com/formulator and enter code DRFTV to get your first card free. drf.com. Raise your game.
Welcome back to Out of the Gate. The stakes action rolls on. Let's go to Delaware Park for the 9th race of the day on Saturday. It's the Grade 2 Delaware Handicap. You can head on over to video.drf.com. Again, get the entire expanded stakes analysis. But Mike, this really boils down to, you got a couple of Grade 1 winners in a field like this. One of them is a late. The other one is Unbridled Mo. Unbridled Mo is a horse that, boy, you know, you talked about it a little bit in the stakes preview. Todd Pletcher has done an unbelievable job with this mare. She's 5 years old. She hasn't been the soundest. She's had a little bit of an issue throughout her career. But, boy, it's hard to argue with what he's gotten out of her. And guess what? She's a Grade 1 winner.
Yeah, Grade 1 winner, a millionaire with only 11 starts behind her. Pletcher's just done an unbelievable job. It's interesting to look at her on paper because he just keeps her out of New York. He doesn't even want to run her in the races in New York. He finds spots for her out of town. It's almost always the right spot for her, and she just picks up checks. And obviously, she does have the Grade 1 win, 2 starts back. We can look at the replay of the Apple Blossom now. Now, obviously, she had some things go her way in this race. Unique Bella, who was a huge favorite, had some real problems early in this race, wouldn't settle, went too fast probably up front, and here comes Unbridled Mo. She's just going to chug along through the stretch and overtake this field late. It's a quality win for her. I still feel like if Elate comes back off the layoff and is close to ready, this race probably isn't getting it done for Unbridled Mo, but there's really nothing to knock about this horse.
You see her right there, that last 16th of a mile. She popped back to her left lead. We've touched on it briefly in the stakes preview. Is there any concern about the additional distance? Because I don't think she's going to necessarily love 10 furlongs.
Yeah, no, I would worry about the 10 furlongs for her, too. Now, she does have the right running style, I guess. If this race, you know, there's a little bit of pace in here. If they go fast early, I think she is going to sit it out and make one run in this race. But I'd be concerned about the 10 furlongs.
Let's talk about the big girl in here. You're going to go with Elate. She really is simply the horse to beat in this spot. She went off as the favorite in the Breeders' Cup Distaff last year, and she also is a Grade 1 winner multiple times over. Yeah,
she had a great year last year as a 3-year-old. It took her this horse a while. After a really impressive debut late as a 2-year-old, it took her a while to put things together as a 3-year-old, but boy, did she put things together last summer and got on a really good run. And as you mentioned, it made her the favorite in the Breeders' Cup Distaff in November. She didn't run great that day. It wasn't a total disaster, but she didn't run great in the Breeders' Cup. This is her first start since then. I just feel like she's too good for these horses, Matt. I know that there's a layoff, 10 furlongs, you know, off of a layoff like this. It could be a problem for her, but I just think she's too good for these horses. Let's go back to the Beldame. This is the race that, you know, made her the favorite in the Breeders' Cup Distaff last year, and this isn't the strongest field in the world for a Grade 1 race in New York, but I mean, how could you win a Grade 1 race any easier than this? Just sitting in behind as soon as Jose Ortiz found some daylight. I mean, it's lights out for this field. This was a really impressive performance, and obviously the 10 furlongs you don't worry about with her, Matt, because she has that Alabama.
And it really feels like even if she's not at 100% for this race, if she's back at 90%, she's still way the horse to beat in a spot like this. The question comes down to price, and that's really the only reason that I'm going against Elate, because she is strictly the horse to beat. But I'm not enamored with Mopatism. I'm not enamored with Unbridled Mo for the reasons that we made mention. If I'm trying to shop around, I'm going to go down to the inside with the horse that won the local prep for this Delaware handicap. That's the number 1, Teresa Z. She most recently won the Obeah Stakes down at Delaware. We're going to take a look at that run right now. And okay, she might be a little bit slow on paper at this point, but you look at the pedigree, it would suggest that she wants to run all day. And the tape that we're looking at right now, it's at least encouraging to me to make me think that the 10 furlongs is going to be to her liking, maybe a little bit more so than some of the other girls in this race. She's certainly on the slower side. She needs to improve her game by leaps and bounds to be competitive with Elate, but there's a part of me that doesn't think that that's totally out of the realm of possibilities. Elate, strictly the horse to beat, but I want to take a little shot against simply because of the price. I'll go with the number 1, Teresa Z, in the Delaware handicap. Let's move on to the West Coast. 3-year-olds going 9 furlongs out at Los Al. It's the Los Alamitos Derby. 3-year-olds take center stage. It's the marquee event for the Los Alamitos meeting Saturday at Los Al. Race number 8 is the Los Alamitos Derby. 9 furlongs on the main track. Again, you can find all the expanded stakes preview over on video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Forms YouTube channel. Mike, this race, there's only 5 horses signed on. Baffert has 2 of them. O'Neill has 2 of them. Really, it's a situation where there's not a ton of speed signed on. And if you think that Axeman can rebound after his disaster in the Matt win, he looks like he could be on a lonely lead. The question is, how do you trust him coming out of the Matt win?
Yeah, I guess that's the real problem, at least the one that I had with him, because if you go back to his 4 starts prior to that, and he won 3 of those really convincingly. You guys can throw up the replay of the Sir Barton now. Not that you could really see Axeman in this race. Obviously, that big foggy track on Preakness weekend. But he will eventually emerge from that fog, and he's just on a clear leader. He's way better than these horses. You know, the one loss of those first 4 starts, he had a big excuse in that one, in that wicked pace in the San Vicente. The problem is he bombed again last time in the Matt Win, and I don't know what his excuse was, but I know Baffert said he, threw himself in the paddock in that race, and maybe that is a legit excuse, but I thought he was pretty hard to trust coming out of a performance like that. Not that he isn't way the horse to beat in here, but I don't know. I felt like I wanted to take a shot against him.
I also have a hard time believing it when Baffert says, well, he likes to go home. He didn't like to ship very often. Well, he didn't have a problem shipping to Baltimore, but all of a sudden he had a problem shipping to Kentucky. Who knows? I agree with you. I don't want him in a spot like this, but his speed is going to be very, very dangerous. You're interested in not one of the Bafferts, not one of the O'Neills. You're interested in the outsider, the inside runner, #1 draft pick for Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I just like the way this horse is headed. I think it did take him a while to sort of put things all together. It's only in his last 2 starts that it feels like he's starting to figure this game out. I really liked his maiden win 2 starts back, and then he returned last time in the Grade 3 affirmed. And, this wasn't the strongest field in the world, and he got a very good trip in this race, but I just like the way that he came for these horses on a slow pace. He goes right by them to take over, and I like the way he finishes this race off too, Matt. I think this horse is headed in the right direction, and if, Axeman, if he's difficult to trust, and I think he is a little difficult to trust, maybe this is the right horse at the right time.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like draft pick as well. And there's a part of me also that wonders if this horse is going to appreciate additional distance as well. You see, I thought his best stride was at the very end there. He started to level off nicely. And he's another one of those 3-year-olds. We're at a point right now, everyone knows the story with Justify and will he or won't he run again. But we talked about it a little bit with King Zachary, and we can talk about it, I think, as well with a horse like Draft Pick. If they come forward with a big effort on Saturday afternoon, all of a sudden, the Travers looks like a much more open, sort of competitive race than perhaps we had thought it may end up being if a horse like Justify were to show up. I'm going to go with Draft Pick as well. I think he continues to improve, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw another forward move from him here on Saturday afternoon for Peter and Joe Talamo in the irons. We're going to move over to a couple other segments that we've got. Jonathan Kinchin with JK's Play of the Day. He's got a pick 3 at Indiana Grand on Indiana Derby night. And then we go over to the Timeform US Spotlight. David Aragona takes a look at a tremendous betting race Saturday afternoon at Belmont Park. That's the Forbidden Apple. Let's throw it to those segments now.
Hey everybody, welcome to JK's Play of the Day. The last weekend before Del Mar and Saratoga come upon us, let's make a little bit of money leading into those great summer meets. I'm going to take you to Indiana Grand, their big stakes day. A little bit confused what they're doing at the betting menu. I'm not sure why the pick 4 is not going to end in their Indiana Derby, but for whatever reason, we're going to play a pick 3 that ends in that Indiana Derby. We'll start in race 7. It's the Warriors Veteran Stakes on the turf a mile and a 16th. I'm going to use 4 horses here. I'm going to use the 2 CM Reap, who ran well at Churchill Downs last time, winning with a 125 time form figure. The 5, My Barley, a horse that ran well in the Mystic Lake, winning that race up at Canterbury Park. The 7, the horse for Kelly Rubley, obviously the trainer of our favorite horse, the Desidera, owned by Gunpowder Farms. I've always been really impressed with the type of horses that they get, especially their grass types. I always upgrade those a little bit. I think that they're all well bought for Gunpowder, and that's the 7 Dollarna. And then I'm going to use the 9 Dot Matrix for our buddies at 10 Strike Racing. The horse ran well last time in the Kingston at Belmont. I'm just trying to, and then on to race 8, the Indiana Oaks. I've talked about this filly quite a bit, and that's Talk Voove to me. I think she's a talented grade 1 type of horse. I think she's got some big race opportunities this summer. I think she's going to potentially enjoy the added distance with the extra 16th of a mile. I think she might get better the further they go. I don't need anybody else in this spot. I'm going to single Talk Voove for me. And then in the finale, the Indiana Derby, there's take a little bit some. I think you can grind and come up with some like Axel, Dark Vader. It's going to be King Zachary. This horse is extremely talented, ran really well in the Matt win for Romans, and when Romans gets one going in the direction, they typically stay going in that direction. I think he's a figure layover with his 121 time form US figure last time that he earned. I think he's going to be extremely tough in this spot and finish off the pick 3 with 2 singles. Good luck. We'll see you next week.
Hi everyone, this is David Aragona with this week's Time Form US Spotlight. We're going to be taking a look at the 9th race on Saturday at Belmont Park. It's the Forbidden Apple Stakes going a mile on the turf, and this is an ungraded stakes race, but it could easily have a grade 2 or grade 3 label attached to it because this is a pretty strong field for a race like this at the end of the Belmont meet before we head up to Saratoga. Some trainers, I guess, trying to get a prep in before some of the big graded stakes races up at the Spa. We'll take a look at the entire field for this race. It's just a 7-horse field, but this race is really has a real high concentration of quality in it. And the number 2 horse, Disco Partner, I made him 9-5 on the morning line. He figures to be a pretty strong favorite in this race. He's a horse that is pretty popular, usually gets a ton of support, and he actually won this same race last year, so he's trying to win it 2 years in a row. Up in the right-hand corner of the Time Form US preview screen, you see that red See Details button. Click on that and view the pace projector, and you see that this race is predicted to feature a fast pace, and that's not really surprising when you look at who's in the field, because horses like Blind Ambition, the number 5 horse, and the number 6 Pocket Change, they've shown speed in sprint races. They're really turf sprinters, excelling at distances from 5, 6, 7 furlongs, so stretching out to the mile, you would expect that they're going to be forwardly placed in this race, going pretty quickly up front. And the number 4 horse, Voodoo Song, I mean, he's a router, but he's a confirmed front runner. Last year, he's the kind of horse that would just run off in his races and set extremely fast paces. We saw him do that a couple of races at Saratoga. So it seems like this race is going to be pretty contentious on the front end, and maybe that's going to favor some of the closers. The number 2 horse, Disco Partner, he's not predicted to be that far off the pace, even though he's been a closer in sprint races. He's got enough tactical speed that he shouldn't be coming from too far back in this race. So we'll take a look at Disco Partner. He's the morning light favorite. He's the horse to beat as he tries to win this race for the 2nd year in a row. I don't have any major knocks against this horse, but I do think you really have to note, when this horse won this race last year, it was just a significantly easier field. I mean, you look at the horses that were 2nd and 3rd that day, Get Jets. He hadn't really established himself at that point. He was more of an allowance horse, and Bondurant. They're just not quite of the quality of a lot of the horses that he's facing this year. And of course, I can't really make much of his 4-star Dave effort going a mile at Saratoga last year, because that was a yielding turf course that he clearly doesn't like. So you really just have the one firm turf course, 1 mile race to go on when you're assessing his form here. And I don't know what to make of that race. How does he class up against this field going a mile? As the favorite, I'm not quite willing to take a short price to find out, but I think you do have to respect this horse's talent, because he just consistently runs well every time that he gets his preferred firm going. So I think he's dangerous in here, but I think there are a lot of other options to consider. The number 4 horse, Voodoo Song, is a horse that I think is extremely dangerous in this race. He was a really good 3-year-old. He got good for a short period of time during the summer at Saratoga last year, and I think there was a legitimate question about whether he could come back this year and recapture that form. And he's answered all of those questions and then some, because he was extremely game 2 back when he won at 7 furlongs in that allowance race over American Guru, who was turning out to be a really promising stakes-bound runner for Jimmy Jerkins, and Tomboulane, who also came back and won a sprint race impressively. And Voodoo Song was completely dead at the top of the stretch of that race, and I thought he was extremely game to battle back and win. And then last time, he's coming out of one of the toughest flat mile turf races that's been contested this year, where Oscar Performance set a North American record, winning the poker, and Made You Look, who has really improved for Chad Brown, was 2nd, and Voodoo Song was right in the teeth of a really strong pace that day, and I thought he was very game to hold on for 3rd. If he repeats that effort, I think he's the biggest threat to upset Disco Partner in this race. But there are some others to consider. The number 7 horse, Projected, he typically gets some support for the Chad Brown barn. This is a horse that he's not really a winning type. I mean, he typically gets pretty good trips, and last time Monmouth, I know he was kind of down inside and maybe trying to squeeze through a tight hole, but in my opinion, he kind of had his chance that day and just didn't really show the willingness to go by those horses. So I think Projected is the kind of horse that's going to be somewhere around to the finish. I just don't know if he's really a winning type in this race. I do prefer him to Chad Brown's other horse, though, Offering Plan, who's just been facing slightly lesser company, and I'm not sure he's really at his best on a firm turf course. And then another horse to consider in this race that's really the true wild card in the field is the number 1 horse, Mr. Haverkamp. He's been extremely impressive up in Canada, winning turf races and synthetic races by wide margins, defeating actually some decent company, not quite up to the class of horses that he's facing in this race. But I mean, those are no slouches, some of the horses that he's destroying in those races up in Canada. His one trip up to down to Naira last year in the Saranac, he lost to Voodoo Song, but that was going a mile and 1/8. Maybe that's a little bit far for him. The Belmont turf course, going this 1-turn mile, should be a little bit kinder to his style. So I don't think he's a horse that you can completely count out. He's going to be a price in this race. I'm probably going to use him around third or fourth, but there are a lot of options to consider in a really tough edition of the Forbidden Apple. We'll see if Disco Partner can win it for the second year in a row, but I'm taking Voodoo Song to pose the slight upset. So let's send it back to the studio.
Best bet time here on Out of the Gate. Mike, hopefully we can smoke out a couple of winners. You're going to go to Belmont Park.
Yeah, Belmont Race 6. It's a 40 claimer for fillies and mares going a mile on the turf. Non-winners at 2 Life. I'm interested in Enthusiastic Gal in this race. She's a 6-year-old, very lightly raced, only 6 career starts, but she began a long time ago with some real promise. Obviously something went badly wrong. She missed over 2 years of racing, and she's now come back this year as a 6-year-old with 2 starts. She had a real bad trip at Pimlico in her first start back, but she ran well that day, and then she came up to Monmouth with this race for trainer Steve Caceres, and she just had no chance in here, Matt. They walked on the lead in here. The horses that run 1-2 were 1-2 all the way around the track. She was off the pace. She had to make a 5-wide run around the second turn in this race, and you can just see her. She's going to keep plugging on through the stretch, making up ground every step of the way. This was a real nice performance. If she can pull a better trip on Saturday under Irad Ortiz Jr., I just think she's found a field of 2 Life claimers here that she is just better than, and I think this is a really good spot for her to get back on track.
My best bet comes in race number 8 at Delaware on Saturday. The Kent Stakes, 3-year-olds going a mile and an eighth on the turf course. I like Golden Brown, the number 6 horse in here. To me, fascinating entrant, and really when you just boil it down to what we're looking at, highest last out buyer in the field, highest last out time form US raw rating, not including the pace situation, and this tape here. This was his most recent start, first time going 2 turns on turf, facing older horses in the Dan Horn at Monmouth Park, and the horse that he's trying to run down on the front there, that's Irish Straight. Irish Straight is a graded stakes winner on turf. He is a good older horse. The fact that Golden Brown came as close as he did in his first time going 2 turns, first time on turf, I think there's a lot to like here, and he's going to be a very, very fair price, a very square price. I'd imagine every bit of double digits, if not higher, in that sort of mid-teen range. I think Golden Brown has a giant chance in this spot. We'll find out. He should be a square number in the Kent Stakes on Saturday at Delaware Park. He is going to be my best bet. Number 6 in the 8th race at Delaware. Thank you all for watching this week's edition of Out of the Gate. For all the other offerings from DRF TV, head on over to video.drf.com, as well as the Daily Racing Forms YouTube channel. You can also follow all the latest that DRF TV has to offer on Twitter at DRF Video. That's it for this week. Best of luck when your horses break out of the gate.